Every week, on the overnight bus to New York, Khadija and Osama El Bahnasawy go visit their son. He's jailed in Manhattan, and U.S. prosecutors want him to spend his life in prison. His parents desperately hope for something less. They are his only lifeline. Abdulrahman El Bahnasawy is convicted of a terrorist plot. At 17, he got swept into the ISIS network online, watching videos, then on chat rooms, communicating with recruiters and operatives. Also, without knowing, he was revealing plans to an FBI agent undercover. He was plotting with one other, a mass casualty attack on the New York subway and Times Square. He'd ordered peroxide and some bomb-making materials online in Canada and had them shipped to New York. All the time, he was living at home with his parents and sister in a suburb outside Toronto. Did you have any indication that your son was online plotting this attack?
No.
Never?
Never.
We are a very peaceful family. And another thing, my son loves Canada so much.
But in 2016, on the May-long weekend, when the family set out on a road trip to New York, the FBI was waiting.
When we reached the hotel in New Jersey, the FBI surrounding us in the parking lot, and they took my son from the car, and they told us at that time that my son, he has been in the chatting room, supporting ISIS.
At what point did you find out that your son was plotting a violent attack on citizens of the United States?
The next day, in the meeting, he gave us a paper from the government, which has the charges against my son. We were shocked at that time, yeah.
In the charge, 7 counts of conspiracy to commit and support terrorism. El Bahnasawy is quoted as saying, "These Americans need an attack. I want to create the next 9/11." So what happened? How did a boy from a close family with no history of violence or connections to extremism suddenly turn to terrorist plots? Growing up in Kuwait, he was both troubled and funny. The family moved to Canada when he was 7, but in his early teens, he got into drugs, marijuana mostly, and then inhalants like butane. Then came the depression.
شعرت depressed أوي الأيام دي.
He often confided to his sister on video chats. His parents got him into rehab and mental health programs in Egypt, Kuwait, and Canada. You intervened many times?
Yeah, many times. Actually, he's a good boy. When we told him you need to go to rehabilitation, he never ever refused. He said, "Dad, I need you to be happy of me, of my behavior. I need you guys to be proud of me."
Finally, diagnosed as bipolar or manic depressive, he was prescribed daily medication.
If taken the medication, right medication, he didn't go back to the drugs. He was a wonderful boy. He came back to us as we knew him before.
In grade 11, they enrolled him in a Toronto area Islamic school, even though El Bahnasawy did not identify as a Muslim.
My son was atheist until 17 years old. So when we decide to convince him to go to the Islamic school, it's to avoid the drug. It's not more than this.
But he began to slip, complaining his medication made him gain weight and be dozy. After a few months, he was kicked out. And then he spent days at a time on ISIS chat rooms.
My son took the decision to stop taking the medication. We tried to convince him. Please take the medication, it's very important. So I started to put the medication for him. The medication for him in the food. And he told me, "No, I will not eat from your food again because I noticed you put some medication for me."
El Bahnasawy admits his crimes. In a 24-page handwritten letter recently to the U.S. judge, he describes how ISIS propaganda persuaded him to seek violence against America.
Canada had recently stopped airstrikes. That's why it came to the U.S. This is in no way a justification. I'm merely explaining my thought process at the time.
Many Canadians would say your son was plotting a very violent attack on hundreds of people in New York City. Why should he be given any leniency?
It's very clear that he was really manipulated and influenced by them.
His parents believe his mental illness made him unstable and vulnerable, and they question why no one intervened to warn them.
Those people, they knew that my son was sick, and they continue to do the same.
And when you say those people, who do you mean?
RCMP and FBI.
How do you know they knew he was ill?
They said they knew.
Her son was a patient at a mental health facility in Toronto in 2014. The RCMP knew. CAMH confirmed it 5 days before his arrest. But the U.S. prosecutors argue any mental instability is a distraction with no relevance to sentencing. They argue his incapacitation should be total and lifelong. Dennis Edney is El Bahnasawy's lawyer.
As you well know, the prosecution says that his mental illness is irrelevant, and more to the point, even more proof that he should be incarcerated for life.
Well, they should read our expert reports. This is a highly damaged young man. We shouldn't be in prison.
He's been in jail 2 years already, awaiting sentencing, some of that in solitary confinement. Early on, he scrawled pro-ISIS messages on cell walls, compounding his problems. More recently, he finished his high school equivalency, and he's told the judge,
I definitely do not want to resort to violence or harm. I wonder where I would be if the undercover or anyone else I looked up to would have advised me that there are ways other than revenge attacks and violence. I only ask for a second chance.
We ask for mercy. We ask for human being feelings.
They visit the Manhattan jail once a week now, fiercely loyal to the son they thought they knew. His descent into ISIS is no doubt a combination of influences, and they will all now pay the price. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Toronto.
One other troubling part about this case is that many of the court documents are still sealed, which means defense lawyers cannot review the exact communications between ISIS, the FBI informant, and El Bahnasawy. His Canadian lawyer argues the FBI overstepped its undercover role. Neither the FBI nor the RCMP would talk to us with the case before the courts.